Ladies and gentlemen, we are at episode 4 of the Where Have You Been podcast. My name is Bill Ream, I'm your host, and I'll be honest with you, this time I'm a little bit jealous. My guest today has been all over the world, and honestly, we barely scratched the surface of the places that he's been. I can't wait, actually, for what it's worth, to have another episode with this gentleman further down the road, and I promise that we will do that. But for now, I think we should just take a seat and relax and listen as we hear some fantastic, really, truly fantastic stories with my friend Renato on the Where Have You Been podcast. Today I have Renato with us, and Renato has been all over the place, maybe more places than we can even talk about in an episode. But let's get started with Renato. Hello, and tell us a little bit about who you are. Who are you?
Hey, how's it going? My name is Renato, and a little bit about me. It's always a bit of a loaded question, but I guess for starters, one of the things that I mainly do and how I know Bill is that I actually run a basketball network where we watch mostly NBA, but we're getting into March Madness. We're doing some baseball now. We got quite a few hosts and people that we manage to sort of stretch their fandom out and do what a lot of people like to do, which is narrate the game, have a community of friends to go and enjoy the games with. And yeah, part of that experience has been, I guess, fortified by my travel because we have quite a big global audience, people from the Philippines, Australia, London, you name it. So we've always got a bit of that macro sort of perspective when it comes to anything I do. There's always a global, sort of, I guess, missing piece when people analyze situations. Sometimes that part for me is always present. So thank you for having me on the show so I can share that.
Yeah, awesome. I'm really glad to have you. And so one of the things that makes you unique over the guests that we've had, at least to this point, is you actually were not born in the United States. So that's obviously something that you have a unique bit of travel that I haven't actually had yet on the show. So do you mind talking about that?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in Peru, Lima, Peru, and it's a bit of an interesting story how I was born. Don't know that I'll get so deep in the weeds of things, but long story short, my mother was a journalist at the time, and my father worked at Gillette. He worked pretty high up in accounting, and the economy basically tanked. And, let's say I don't even know what you call it because I'm not a father, but a whole bunch of diapers, let's say a whole packet of diapers would cost you, let's say, $40, which I'm not sure how that compares these days in the United States, but at least in Peru, where we're from, it was enough to be like a week's worth of salary. So it just got astronomically difficult for my parents to be able to afford a living there. And so, kind of crazy enough, at the time we had a president who was quite, how shall I say, he liked to punish anyone who sort of wrote things against him in the newspaper. And so my mom, being a journalist, had quite a few things to say about him. And he threatened to throw her in prison basically after I was born. So we escaped to the United States and, became a legal citizen pretty quickly. We applied for the green card lottery. We got it. And it was almost a crazy chance that I think my father threw the mail away, and in it was our green card lottery sort of paperwork and stuff that we had gotten approved. And luckily, my mom picked it up, found it, and the rest is history. Now I'm a full-blooded American, and I love it over here. And but always my roots. I've gone back to Peru. I can't even count the number of times I've been back, and I love it. It's a part of my identity that I'll never deny, and nobody can deny me of it, no matter how long I've lived in the States.
It's so beautiful. And it's actually, so I did a trip to South America just a couple of years ago, and one of the places that we stopped off in and spent a couple of days was Lima. And we had so many people saying, don't stay in Lima. That's where you go to get in and out of the airport. That's where you go to get to other places in the country. We really enjoyed Lima. I thought it was beautiful. The food was great. The scenery was awesome. The people were beautiful. I would go back, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. So, that's one of the things, you get a lot of this stuff in traveling, right? As you start to read people's advice, read people's perspectives. I think a lot of the times what ends up happening is it becomes sort of a trendy thing for people from this place to say this thing and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, a lot of people do tend to overgloss Lima and say, oh no, you got to do Machu Picchu, you got to do Cusco, you got to do this and that. But the reality is that there's so much beauty in Peru. And I'm glad that you sort of segued into this topic because I've been all throughout Peru. I've been up and down every city you can imagine. I don't think there's been a place that I haven't been to in Peru besides the Amazons. And I've at least traversed and gone through most of it. So yeah, when you say that Lima's a beautiful place, like for sure, even having gone and traveled to all these other places, Lima's my home. And I think because it's become such a center of gastronomy, so if you like food, you could spend a week in Lima and not even touch 1% of the the amazing food that we have. So that's
two of the top restaurants in the world are there.
Yep. So I think, and your story is great. I know we talked about it the other day, but I would like for you to share it in this episode because when my wife listens to it, I kind of butchered the story a bit. So would love to hear it. But I too have been to Central. I have not been to, I'm forgetting the other restaurant. It's like a Japanese fusion restaurant. It's slipping off the top of my head.
I've not killing me. It begins with a K and it's not on the tip of my tongue either.
Yeah, just completely forgot. You know what it was? It was the pandemic. So we went right before the pandemic, maybe 6 months before it happened, about a year. And then between all that time after, it was quite a bit until we traveled again and we were doing the whole sort of gastronomy tour because my wife is a big foodie. And that's basically sort of what dictates a big portion of our trip. So yeah, there's so many things I could tell you about Lima that we could spend a whole episode on it and rest of Peru. I love Lima.
It's called Kajole, Kjolle, and it's actually, so it's upstairs from Central. So I've been to Central, but never been inside of Central. But yeah, we were there and we just happened, and I don't usually tell my stories when I'm on here that much, but just to be brief about it.
This is a good one.
Yeah, we just happened to be there. We planned to be there, but we did a food walking tour while we were there. One of the things that I've learned as I've traveled more, especially if you're only in a place for a few days, I like to ingest as much information as I can in a limited amount of time to really get to know the area and get to know the people and the culture. And, so we did a food walking tour and this woman kept mentioning Central and we didn't even know what it was. We didn't realize that the number one restaurant in the world was there. And so after we were done, we had gone to get something to maybe snack on and just happened to look up the restaurant. We were like, this place has to be booked for a year at least. And it was, except for the next day. And so the next day after that, it had 2 openings and we thought, man, we should just do this. It's the best restaurant in the world, number 1 rated. It was a little pricey for what we had budgeted for our trip. And so realizing that the Kajole, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, was right upstairs. And it's actually the wife who was the head chef at Central for many, many years. And she had just been rated as the top female chef in the world, I think a year or 2 prior, that she had opened her own place upstairs, and it was half the price. And again, booked for months, except for some reason that next day, it was a Wednesday, and for some reason there were a couple of openings. So yeah, we booked that quickly. It was one of the most amazing meals that I've ever had. Almost as appealing visually as it was, the actual flavors. But yeah, it was an evening I'll never forget. So
that's amazing.
I highly recommend Lima.
Yeah, and so now I'm remembering the other restaurant that we didn't get to go to at the time, but the friends, we did a couples trip when we went to Central. The trip was to go eat at Central. That basically was it. But we stayed at my friend's Airbnb, and it was a wonderful time. But you're talking about the other one was Maido, so we didn't get to go to that one. But they went, and they said it was really good, but that they preferred Central over that. But Maido is another restaurant. There's actually, I believe, 4 or 5 Michelin star restaurants. And after you told me your story, I actually had to go look up and see, because I remember who she is, because it's a husband-wife team that runs Central, and I watched a documentary on it fairly recently with my parents. So it was with the guy, but obviously he had a bunch of stories with his wife, and her name is Pia Leon. And so that's the restaurant you went to, Kajole with the K, Kjolle. So that's an amazing story.
To us. She said goodnight to us when we left. She was actually downstairs. There's an area where when you're entering and leaving, where there's all these herbs and everything that they've sourced locally, or wherever they've sourced them. It's local, but they go into the mountains and they find all these fresh things and they pick them and they use those in their meals. And she was going through there probably looking for something she needed to cook with, and she said goodnight to us. And I just thought, man, I met a star,
Yeah, no, she really is, and you did.
Really cool.
And that's the beautiful thing about Peruvian chefs. They are like celebrities, but they are there with you. Gaston Acurio is another a very famous chef in Peru. And, he actually has a chain of restaurants in the United States. So if anybody's listening, you've probably seen some of their restaurants or some of his restaurants in the US. And they're each very unique in their own ways. You're never going to go to one restaurant that's exactly the same as the other. So you have, let's see, La Mar. La Mar is like based on like very seafood oriented. So I believe you for sure have one in New York that I went to with my father. You have that. And then you have, I don't know why I'm blanking out on the one from Chicago right now, but there are a ton of his restaurants, and not even just in the United States, but all around the world. So I highly recommend looking him up, Gaston Acurio, if you want to taste a little bit of that gastronomy Peruvian and you don't want to pay that price. That is a chef that I would go and look up. So yeah, excellent. That is a place or a chef that I would follow. And also, he's also very intimate as well, meeting people when he goes to his restaurants, and he's world renowned. And and the funny part is as great as the gastronomy is, if you talk to my father will tell you, he's never been to either of these places, right? It's not because he can't pay for it. My father's done quite well for himself. It's because he says the best places to go to are the ones like the hole in the walls. You pay $1 and you'll have like the most amazing food. And he's not kidding.
No, yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I can tell you that there are so many different restaurants in Lima. You will not eat poorly over there. It's amazing.
And I just want to mention before we move on, Cusco almost killed me.
Oh, did you get sick?
Almost killed me. It was, thank goodness for the coca tea, first of all. It does work. I may or may not have brought some home with me. I didn't, I should say I didn't, right? But it really does work. But yeah, I just, even just walking up a set of steps to get from one street to the other, it was rough, man. And I realized quickly how often I hold my breath, or even just like tying my shoes, because you hold your breath for a second and then you have to catch it because, you're 14,000 feet. It's higher than Machu Picchu.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I'll just go on a quick little story right here. So my wife and I really do have to give, there's two, I guess, parts in my life when it comes to traveling. It was traveling, actually 3 parts, I guess. Traveling with my parents when I was a child. There was then traveling sort of by myself in between the time that I met my wife. And then there was traveling with my wife. And I really have to give her credit in sort of really augmenting the experience and researching and planning things and booking things ahead of time. I sort of just always did things on the fly. But both of us together, we sort of have that mixture of impulsivity and proactive planning, which seems to work out well for us. One of the things that she planned way ahead of time, and I really encourage anybody out there who's listening and wants to do something different than what you would normally do in Cusco and Machu Picchu, is I would do a place called, or a mountain called Huayna Picchu. And so Huayna Picchu is actually considerably taller than Machu Picchu. And the thing about this is it really is off the beaten path. If you thought it was tough, down there in Machu Picchu, I would not recommend doing this unless you have you don't have to be super fit either, right?
No, but it's true hiking. That's true hiking.
It's a considerable more amount of elevation, but the views up there are incredible. To this day, still the best view I've ever had in my life. We actually saw like a condor flying right above our heads. We were so high. And from that peak of the mountain, you can actually see Machu Picchu from there. And it looks like a small little mountaintop from way up there in Huayna Picchu. So
is that the one that you get to from Machu Picchu, or is that the one that's sort of across a little bit? Because
it's sort of a cross, but on top of it. So you can see, you're looking down into it from the peak.
Okay, because we did one, which I think there's like an in-between sort of, that you actually go into Machu Picchu and then up. So we did that one.
Yeah.
And even that was stunning, but I can't even imagine being higher where you were.
Yeah, I don't know. Everybody's sort of different when it comes to the elevation. I always recommend everyone do the elevation pills just in case. You can buy them on Amazon, and always be careful when buying medication like that. But they have specific medication for it that tends to do the trick for the most part, but some people just get straight up automatically sick. My sister is one of them. My best man at my wedding was one. For me, I've always been sort of, blessed with being able to, I can go jogging in the elevation. I actually really enjoy being in the elevation.
Jeez.
Never had a headache, never had any sort of issues with it. So yeah, just to anybody out there, make sure that you take care of yourself. And if you don't have the experience, it's kind of like, being on a boat. You may not know if you're prone to being seasick, but elevation sickness I think can be much worse.
Yeah.
Just because you do feel almost like you're drowning, I've heard.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Awesome,
On
man.
that note,
Yeah, no kidding. We're definitely getting into some great stories, which I love this already. But
Mhm.
I do want to kind of just get to the point where you're in the U.S. and you're
Yep.
young. Granted, you kind of necessity brought you to the U.S. Your family. What part? When did it become a thing for you that you just knew that traveling was something that you really needed to have in your life?
Oh boy, this is somewhat of a loaded question because, and like most of these things would be, and so I appreciate the time and opportunity. First off, I didn't get to say it at the beginning to be able to talk about these things because it is sort of like a bit of a psychological question. As I heard your first episode, and I was wondering how I would answer this. And unlike most people, I would say that I did not really have much of a passion for traveling, even though I had done it for such a long time. It almost annoyed me going traveling. And I know that sounds a bit entitled and a bit sort of, oh my God, you had all these opportunities, as you guys will find out later, to go to this place and that place. But genuinely speaking, I really enjoy my life in the States and I enjoy my daily life. I'm pretty happy with it. I always have been. I have a good body of friends and family and things that I'm doing. So traveling was almost like a little bit of an annoyance to me to take time out and go do X, Y, and Z. So when it became time for me to go to college, I actually did very little traveling during that time. I went to Spain and I went to South Africa, which is another story for another day. But that is, I wasn't really appreciative of it even during that time, if I really admit it to myself. It wasn't really until I met my wife that in around 2015, 2016, that I then started to really take into consideration just how awesome it is to be able to take time out of your life to have these experiences. The very thing that I got annoyed by, now I was looking forward to, because once you start getting into work culture, just consumer culture, everything that sort of pulls you inside, I then realized how important it was for me to have to go outside. And in reaching the outside, I sort of reached my own roots of where I was from. So sort of full circle. So I would say my wife was a big foundation for having me appreciate the world again.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. I got married in 2016 and I had not, besides Canada, ever left the country. Travel for me was, Florida, Massachusetts, little trips to see family here or there. But until I went on my honeymoon, we went to Rome, we went to Athens, we went to Santorini. I mean, that really it turned me on to what travel can be. So,
Right.
yeah, I agree 1,000%.
Yeah, no,
So,
it's been and it's kind of funny because I listened to your first episode as well, and it's I don't know if it's I don't know why it seems, and I know I don't want to make this reductive or make a big generalization, but there is something that I've noticed about women that tend to really love to travel in a way that maybe not like men have to sort of discover to go do that. Whereas I don't know if that's just sort of my network or what I see over here, but that's something that I've kind of noticed a little bit. And it's just kind of funny that at least in the first episode, the guest was sort of the same way. You kind of had the same thing, and me as well,
mhm.
even as someone whose parents had taken him traveling to a bunch of places. It's an interesting character study, but I certainly wouldn't change it for the world.
So the next part of where we get into the whole the whole bread and butter of what the episodes are. I don't exactly know how you're going to take this, but I'm going to let you take it however you'd like to. I don't expect you to list off where you've been, but let's just start with whatever jumps out to you. If somebody's sitting down with you and we just start talking about travel and you're like, this was my favorite place on earth, or this is, one place that I have to tell you this story. What is that? Where have you been?
Okay, well, thankfully you actually had me list off a bunch of them ahead of time, so that was really nice. And I'll take that list, and then from there I'll pick out some place, I guess, that I would like to go talk about, I guess. In 2024, thankfully, we were able to travel quite a bit for a friend's wedding, and he had a bachelor party in Japan. And from then on, we went to Hong Kong for the actual wedding. So my wife and I decided to plan before then to go on just a all country trip to Japan. Not all country, but at least a few cities this time. So we went to Tokyo, where it's been my third time, my wife's second time, Kanazawa, Japan, Osaka, Japan, Kyoto, Japan. And then we went to Hong Kong. I've been to Colombia many times. I'm married to a Colombian. I got married in Colombia. been all over Colombia. So we went there last year, and we're usually there every year, just like Peru. And my wife is from Zipaquirá, Caribbean, Puerto Rico, Costa Rica. In North America, been bunch of cities now, but I actually had been to more countries than I have to cities in the US. It's just kind of weird to me, especially being from Florida, that it costs you more to get to California than it would on a flight to Peru. So that was really the main reason. But in North America, San Diego, love it. All of Florida, you can ask me anything about Florida. It's like 3 different states, and I lived there my whole life. North Carolina, Pennsylvania, New York, Dallas, New Jersey, Atlanta, Iowa, Boston, Vegas. I've been to Canada for one night in Montreal. South America, Peru, of course. Venezuela, I went there when I was a kid. Brazil, I was there for the 2016 World Cup. Goiás, Brazil. Not a lot of people have been to it, but I went there in 2005 with the Peruvian soccer team. Asia, I've been to Beijing, Shanghai. I didn't know where to classify Russia. I'm sure it's like more Eurasia, but we'll put Russia in World Cup 2018. Japan I went to as a child in a couple small cities where my family lived at the time. So I actually was there during the big Pokemon hype at that time. I've been to South Africa. And then last but not least, Europe. I went to Germany for the 2006 World Cup. Spain 2010 World Cup. I was there towards the end and when they won the title, actually. London, I went on a solo trip. Ireland, I went to study abroad. Amsterdam, solo trip. And then for my honeymoon, my wife planned an awesome trip to Italy. I believe it was southern Italy, where we went to Positano and all those areas like near the water. Portugal, went to 3 different cities there, and then Paris, France, one time with my mom. So
it's incredible, and a lot of that is since 2015-16, is right?
Yeah, a decent chunk of that is since 2015, 2016. And if we didn't go back to Colombia and Peru so often, I would say that we probably would have been to who knows how many more, but I don't take that as a bad thing. I love being able to go to a country and experience as many cities as possible because it's all very unique. And I tend to have actually more fun in these places that people haven't been to before. So
yeah. Let's start with that. So what do you think about that makes it more fun just because you're discovering everything for the first time and you don't have those preconceived nuggets of what people tell you this is what you have to do?
Yeah, in general, I would say I'm a little bit, how shall I say, counterculture. If everybody's going one way, I tend to sort of look the other direction. That tends to be just in general how I sort of do things, not to be kind of like snobby or anything. It's just, if somebody's done it already, why would I want to, you might get a different experience out of it, but there's just so much of the world to go see, so many things to do that why not try something, different for the first time? So what makes it unique is the fact that it becomes sort of my story. And in the off chance that you do meet somebody who's been from there before, the amount of things that you could bond over and talk about is just at a way different level because many people couldn't. Sure. There are some places I've been to on this list that I've never met anybody who's been to these places before. But yeah, it's just it's a bond that you make when you go to these untapped places, that it's not just a bond between you and people that you meet in the future, but who you make a bond with at that time. You may never see these people again, but those bonds will last forever and make a huge impact on your life. So that's what I love about these places. And they're so thankful to meet people from the States or just even in general, tourists, because if they don't expect that to happen normally, they're like, what are you doing here? And then all of a sudden,
why are you here? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole different appreciation. It's sort of like Chicago when the summer comes. There's a appreciation over here for sunlight differently than there is for people in Florida.
So is there anything that jumps out at you that from any of those travels, places where I certainly haven't been, that you just maybe meeting somebody or just the time you spend, anything that jumps out at you?
Yeah, I can talk about a few different places very quickly, and I won't go into any of them too deep. But the first one that jumps out, and
you can go as deep as you want to, just for the record.
Yeah, no problem. I just sort of to cover the places that not a lot of people have been to before, but one place that I can point off the top of the list, which when I went at the time, I was a child. I remember it quite well, but I never knew at that time. Of course, how could you? You can't predict the future. But I wonder, Venezuela, for instance, right? There's a lot of political climate around it. And not just even in the United States, but it's going on for quite some time in South America, as there's a lot of geopolitical struggles between the surrounding countries and Venezuela. But I actually went there when I was a kid, and I remember exactly what pre Chavez Venezuela was. And Chavez was, a political leader over there. We don't have to go and talk about him. He's not worth it. But yeah, before the economy tanked and sort of all these big changes happened in Venezuela, I remember the city. And one of the things that just impressed me the most is just, it was such a modern city at the time. Tall buildings. I remember people with briefcases, suits on. I remember thinking this is like the United States of South America. And I was maybe 7 years old at the time. This was probably 1996, 7, around there. So about 3 years after this period, that's when you start to get the huge migration to the United States during their first recession. It was like around 2000, 2002, where you just had a huge migration into the States and elsewhere. But before that, this was like peak economy in Venezuela. And I remember the thing that sticks out to me the most is this big water fountain and all these kids playing around it and laughing and having a good time. And I remember just having so much happiness at that point. I don't know why that memory stuck out for me on that trip, but I think that there's something poetic about just seeing that country and that state at that time, and just how things have changed from, now, from what I know, because I have friends that are Venezuelan, and it's a whole different experience now.
Sure. I can kind of visualize it, and I can just see the joy. Yeah. So anything as you got older where you've gone, maybe even with your wife?
Yeah. So I would say with my wife, and I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head, but you know what I'll talk about right now? That I know people are starting to go there now because it's become a little bit trendy since we've gone there. But Portugal is a place that I would highly recommend for anybody to go to. If I had to pick between the trip to southern Italy and Portugal, I would say Portugal all day, every day. It's just, not that I didn't like Italy. I loved Italy. I thought it was
really
a phenomenal place.
And it's funny because I work in a bank. And so we have people, especially in the summertime, but constantly coming in to buy euros to go. And this past year, it was I bet you 85% of the people were going to some area of Italy. And I actually went to Italy last year, so you can count me on the list, but that's incredible to hear that. So yeah, please tell me why.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of things I can say about Portugal. So for one, the food, of course, and the funny thing is I've never been big into gastronomy. That really was something that my wife really put in my life. But I will say that the culinary diversity is just like Peru is. I mean, you got wonderful seafood, you got just great meats, you got these stews that are incredible. It's one of those things that really you have to be there to see it. And half the time you don't even know, sort of what you're having to eat. Another thing that I really liked about Portugal is that you can tell the authenticity of a place by how many people, more or less take Amex, so to speak, or, speak English. And not that it's always a bad thing, but I mean, when you go into these restaurants, it's not really expected that you're going to necessarily have people who speak English in them. It's a lot of Portuguese, which thankfully, due to knowing Spanish, if I hear it, I can understand, and they can understand my Spanish back and forth. So just to be able to have that sort of authenticity anywhere you go, where it's just going to be a place where they're not trying to cater to Americans, they're not trying to cater to tourism. I mean, there are places where that happens for sure, as it's become one of the more popular European destinations to go to, but you can still find quite a bit of history in the gastronomy. There's so many things I could talk about. The fact that I know one big thing, if it's a cost thing for anybody, the Ubers in Italy were so expensive. If you want to go like a kilometer and a half, you're paying, like $25-30 for that. In Portugal, I would say it's the only place I've been to in Europe that has South American prices. And so for anybody who's been to South America, if you pay a taxi cab, you'll pay like at most maybe $2, $3 to go halfway across the city. So that's just getting around in general. And really, when you think about any sort of destination to go to, how you get from point A to point B is so important. The efficiency of how many things you can see at once. Portugal is one of those places where you can just hop into a car and be in one experience within 20 minutes and do it for like a fraction of the price. And the experiences themselves are absolutely incredible. The diversity that you see in food is also in the landscapes as well. there was a city that we went to, and not a lot of people know the city, but it's called Lagos. And Lagos is like this vacation beach town, which the Europeans will know about this because they often flock there. But it's just the beaches in Portugal are absolutely incredible. And I've grown up in beaches my whole life. Peru is a beach. Lima, Peru is like a beach city. And, we have tons of beaches in Peru. And I grew up in South Florida around beaches. I've even in Chicago right now, I live right across from Lake Michigan, and I have a synthetic beach over there. So I think I know how to tell a good beach from a bad beach. And these are probably some of the best beaches I've seen. I mean, I've been to Puerto Rico where they also have incredible beaches, but it's just it's a different climate. It really does feel like God actually touched. And not to get too religious, but it really does seem like a place of magic and wonder as you see the water and as you go climbing and walking around the places. It has everything in it that you could possibly want on a trip. So, and that's just one city. I mean, we went to Porto, we went, to the capital. We've been all over. But Portugal, I highly recommend for anybody who hasn't been there, doesn't have it on their list. You will not walk away upset at anything. You'll be glad that you went.
Fantastic. And when you go to a place like that, I don't want to say necessarily seek out, but do you try to have conversations with people who are, local or even if there's other tourists that are kind of along the way that you happen to meet who speak English and, or whatever the case may be, or do you kind of just stick to yourself?
Oh, no, we definitely interact with the locals because depending on which country you go to, there's a variety of different things that you sort of tend to see from country to country, right? A lot of times people like to get really bogged up in Google reviews, and sometimes those do work, right? Sometimes depending on the influx of people and the types of people that go to these countries, they may be able to recommend good restaurants. But a lot of times in Google reviews, it's Americans reviewing foreign food.
Sure, and they have expectations that are not the same.
Exactly. But when it comes to people that live in other countries and how they view food, they may not necessarily write, a review about that. It's just going to be someone that you meet, going to a bar somewhere, having a drink and talking to someone. That's generally what we do. And that's how we pick the restaurants. Because I mentioned Portugal a second ago, and sort of similar, if anybody's ever been to South Beach or any of these like beach, towns, what you'll find a lot of the time is right near the water. That's where all the restaurants are. And they're going to be the most expensive. They're going to be the most, just, I guess, non-traditional. That tends to happen just because the real estate is so expensive there. And people who go to these countries will want to be near the beach. And they're paying really for the view more than the actual food itself. So a lot of times what you need to do is just find someone who can achieve both ends, right? Place with a good view, but also traditional food. And there's no better way to get that than the local. So 100%, that's how we do everything.
Yeah. I agree 100%. It's more difficult for me sometimes because I only speak English. It's on my agenda to learn at least enough Spanish to be able to communicate with someone if we go to other places. But for now, I'm sort of stuck. But I do absolutely try to strike up conversations because those are memories that you can't replicate. And like you said, going to a foreign place, who knows better than people who live there what the best places are to go and and visit and see. So
yeah, and the thing is nowadays with Google Translate, I mean, generally speaking, a lot of people people don't live in a bubble necessarily, even if it's a remote place. I mean, the internet's reached a lot of areas, and when they experience tourism, they know Google Translate. And if they don't know it, then you can also pump it into your phone and, play it off of your phone. And so it'll speak for you depending on what you want to say. That's been quite handy lately because it's interesting. Even from 2016 up until 2024, 2 different experiences in Japan, right? It almost seems like it's been 2 decades from that point to now. But I remember back then going to a restaurant in 2016 and just basically clicking a bunch of buttons in a ramen shop, not knowing what any of the buttons meant, but just having fun with that and just getting whatever I got. Whereas now I could use Google Lens to just scan over the options and actually know what each one of them say. So in some ways, you can always have fun with not doing that. But at the same time, of course, you do want to know sometimes what you're ordering and whatnot. And sometimes you just want to say thank you and that I really appreciate your food and this is what I liked about it, or this is what I enjoyed about the experience. And you can convey that with technology. So it has changed how you interact with the world in a major way. So we can all be connected and understand each other if we really want to.
Yeah, and I think that actually that means something. That's something I definitely agree with. So I don't remember the phrases now, but whether it was in Italy or in Prague or even in South America or anywhere like that, I've definitely tried to at least, and I think it means something to the locals to at least see that you've made an effort to, because I'm sure, and I don't mean to stereotype people, but I know there's enough travelers, especially from America. And again, I am stereotyping, but I don't mean to, because
It's
there's
okay.
enough that are the other way as well. But
I think
there's
a lot of
enough
people
people
would
that
agree
will
with
just
you.
go and just assume like you should know how to speak English to be able to communicate with me, and that's not the way it is. Like, you're in somebody else's land, in somebody else's country. It's
Exactly.
not up to them to try to communicate with us. It's up to us to try to communicate with them. So, especially if it's not a tourist town, you know.
Yep. One place. So we just recently went to Japan, and so it was funny because we went there with a bunch of friends. It was a friend's wedding, and it's a bunch of guy friends, girlfriends. It was more of an intimate trip because it was a destination wedding, and so they were really impressed. Even though it was not the first time that I had been to Japan, but when you say "arigato gozaimasu," like that's how you would say it. My wife says it much better than I do, but
Sounded good to me.
every time that we would say it to the Japanese, they would always just like chuckle and smile, and they were just so thankful every single time that just like light up, just their faces, and that just tells you, and that's with the amount of American tourism that has been in Japan and has become a problem in a lot of ways. There's been a lot of complaints. I don't know if you've kept up with those stories, but it is nice to just be able to even say the word thank you, and then you just see the genuine smile on people's faces. I did karaoke when I was there, and I actually know quite a bit of Japanese songs because I watch a ton of anime. So I was almost I was so ready for this trip to be able to do Japanese karaoke. And funny enough, my wife and I, so this is actually a pretty good story into that, just like a very authentic experience with fellow Japanese that they could barely speak any English, but we had the best night doing karaoke. So basically what ended up happening was my wife and I were trying to go to a steak dinner that night, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So we wanted to have, actually, that night, we wanted to have Kobe beef. We wanted to have Kobe.
Was this in Tokyo or?
This was Kyoto. And so what ended up happening is we went to this restaurant in Kyoto, and I felt kind of bad for this guy because he advertised Kobe beef. We had gone the previous night to this sake bar, and the woman who was there basically gave us all these recommendations for different places. And these were she was like, this place will give you Kobe beef for the best price, and it's authentic to Japanese. We were like, okay, perfect, we'll be there. So we ended up going to this restaurant. It was really hard to find because it was on the second floor. We were using Google Maps to sort of look from the outside inside, trying to figure out how the heck do we get to this place. Eventually we find it. We go to the second floor. Thing is, my wife was looking for luggage. And so we decided, and actually now that I'm remembering, it was Osaka. So we ended up going to get the luggage at Osaka, and we said we'd be back at like 9:30. Turns out that we weren't able to make it back at that time, and we felt so bad because we were the only customers in this guy's place. And I don't know, he was expecting us. He's like, you will be back, right? And we're like, yes. But we ended up not making it back at that time. And so we decided that night to go and try to find a place so that we can call him, because we thought maybe the phone number would be tied into his mobile number. What ends up happening is we end up going upstairs to this karaoke bar, and there's nobody in this place. There's just this one, slightly, I would say like chubby, like a guy, like bartender that was there. He was just rocking out by himself, just drinking. And we were like, okay, why don't we go hang out over here? So the surprise for me was that my wife actually wanted to stay. She's very shy. So it's not always that she even wants to sing. But I guess because we were the only ones there, she's like, yeah, let's do this. So we decided to go and sort of have ballads, her song for me, my song for her, back and forth. It was this wonderful experience. And then all of a sudden, these 4 guys showed up. And, when they popped in at first, I thought I was like, oh, these guys are going to just ruin the time between me and my wife. And so we were almost about to leave. And then all of a sudden they start singing. And if you know anything about the Japanese and karaoke, they take it seriously. Mm-hmm. These guys were like a 4-man ballad. I mean, they were absolutely incredible, and they did not look like they were the type to be these kinds of singers. And then as they sang, then did like a rap song, and then they did a rap song. So we weren't actually talking to each other at first, but it was almost like we were having our own battle, one against the other. And then I start like I'm like basically they were like Backstreet Boys, and I was like, yeah, I know Backstreet Boys. And then they put it on I Want It That Way, and we all sang together. Then I was like, oh, you know Dragon Ball Z? And then they were like, yeah. And then we sang Dragon Ball Z. And then it was such a good time. We ended up taking a picture at the end of the night. The bartender who was there, he sang a song actually because of the war, like World War II, like some old Japanese song. And that was really cool to listen to at the time. So in general, and we didn't even really have any conversations. It was all just singing.
The music. Dude, that's so awesome.
So yeah, they were really cool. Didn't exchange numbers, didn't do any of that. We'll just stay with that memory forever.
That is so fantastic. And you actually have taken my segue the way I had wanted it to go, which was into Japan.
And actually, just one thing, if I can, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
We do end up going. So the next day, we do end up going back to the steakhouse. That guy was so thankful that we ended up going back, and we had to go and leave that day to go to Kyoto, actually. And so on that day, we were just, hustling and bustling to get out, but we still made it there, had a wonderful, like one of the best meals we had in Japan. And he was super thankful, took a picture with him. And, that was just a way to sort of complete our last time in Osaka. So just wanted to bring that out, that we ended up going to support him as well, as he brought us to the karaoke place somehow. And then we ended up going back. And it was great. Sorry.
I love stories like that. So awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do want to, I want to hear more about Japan, if you don't mind, because it's been on my list for a long, long time. And actually the year that we went to South America, which I would not trade for anything, we will talk, and you and I have talked beforehand. We probably will end up having a second episode together somewhere down the line. So if we don't get to it today, it is what it is. But I definitely want to talk about Medellin. It was one of my favorite places I've ever been to, and places like that. But when we went to South America, we had actually originally intended on going to Asia, and it just something with the cost and whatever and the timing, it just didn't work out. So it's still on my list, and I still want to get there. So I love hearing stories about Japan specifically. Anything you can tell me about your time in Japan, I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, we went to a couple different cities this time. I had been close to Kyoto before. My cousins, they lived there right around the time that I was 8. It was forget exactly what the city was called around there, but it was a super small city, and we're talking like 1998. So my cousins, who are Peruvian, we don't have any Japanese blood in us, but they moved to Japan because actually at the time, and I believe still today, I'm not 100% sure, but it was very easy to emigrate to Japan because we had a Japanese Peruvian president, Fujimori, and could be a whole conversation about him. But yeah, my cousins ended up with my aunt emigrating to Japan. She opened up a restaurant there, and so we went to go visit her when I was around 8 years old. But this is the first time I went back to Kyoto, much older, 35 years old. And yeah, Kyoto was just such a wonderful city. One of the things sometimes when I say that I like to go against the grain, it's not just off the beaten path, right? That's not always what doing something different is. It's when people say that something is overrated, finding the beauty in it still. And that would be Kyoto for me in a nutshell. I think Kyoto was my favorite city that I went to. And even though, it is really touristy, tons of people over there, some of the lore in that gets lost. You take pictures and there's people sort of everywhere and this and that. Once you start to go off the beaten path within such a popular city and you go and you interact with people around, that's when you sort of really feel like the bread and butter of the city. So Kyoto, I highly recommend. I mean, of course, you're going to go and do basically, the winding, the stairs that go up with like the red, like lanterns and all that. But funny enough, my wife and I decided to do that. I forget what it's called exactly. You probably seen it in a bunch of pictures in Kyoto where they have like these little red like lanterns that you walk up these like big stairs. Anyway, the trip itself to walk up those stairs is pretty difficult as is. It's probably like a 20-minute walk just to get up to like the peak. I go with my wife and I'm like, why don't we walk up this way? Because it seems interesting. What it ended up being like I think it was like an hour or 2-hour hike. We did not expect that, but we couldn't go back. We got so deep into it. But on the way, if you look this up online, the path that we ended up going on, It's supposed to be one of like the best, most authentic bamboo hikes in, the entire country. So there is like this like really famous bamboo forest that we ended up going to, but this one was so much better. And we actually saw monkeys climbing in the trees. Like it was just a very authentic experience. And we caught the sunset dipping. It was scary too because we didn't really know where we were and didn't have any signal on our phone. We didn't know where we were walking to, but just the tranquility, the coldness. Kyoto really does have a lot of, or the coolness of the fresh air. I meant Kyoto really does have just the embodiment of old Japan, new Japan. The night times are beautiful. I highly, highly, highly recommend Kyoto. And for people out there that are listening, yes, do the touristy things. Don't just stick to those things. Kyoto has a lot more to go and offer in terms of the experience there. So I could talk about Kyoto all day.
Well, give me an example.
In Kyoto?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I wanted to talk about a little funny story when I was over there. This one was really quick, but we ended up going to this bar. So, okay, actually, I'll tie that in with the story, what you're asking me. So there is the geisha district, right? And these days, because of these really rowdy American tourists, you actually are not allowed to walk through these streets. They have like these do not like enter signs because the geishas could be out and about, just sort of there. And for anybody who doesn't know what geishas are, they're basically these almost princess-like Japanese women that are basically a big staple of especially the Kyoto culture. So they really do treat them almost like mini gods, like priests almost. They're just a huge part of the culture. So you can't really interact with them. You can't talk with them. You're not supposed to. It's like very rude. So basically, my wife and I, we didn't realize when we were walking at night away from the hike that we just went on, we basically ended up in the geisha district, not supposed to be there, but just completely deadpan silent. And we could actually see where the geishas were living and where they were staying. So we were like, oh my God, are the police going to come and arrest us? What's going to happen? And at that point, we go and we walk into like this little, it says bar on it. Just that's it. We walk into this bar and this, I would say he was probably somewhere in his 70s, 80s, old guy, right? And we decided to go have a drink inside there. And he was at this time just already so happy that we were in there. Who knows if we were his only customers of the night. He goes and gives us a bunch of Japanese sake, and in comes another couple. And when they sit down next to us, they tell us their story, which very short, like 1 minute, is just they basically ended up going to another bar where it was a private event for a geisha, and they didn't realize it. And the geisha goes and walks in with her entourage, and the police show up, and they think that they're going to get arrested. So then they hiked out of there. So basically, all of us were running away from what we thought was the geisha police, and we end up in this bar. But those two had met in their hotel, like something. So they were kind of on this like little date. The guy was from Canada, girl was from the States. And he looked a lot like Travis Kelce, like a spitting image. Actually, not of Travis Kelce, his brother.
Jason,
Jason. So then the thing is the bartender kept looking at us and he's like, don't I know you from somewhere? And then like I was just playing around, and so I put on my phone famous football player, and I showed it to him, and he goes, oh, and then he goes and takes out this big camera, and then he starts taking pictures of us, and then he's like they kept telling him like no, this is a joke, but he wouldn't take it. He insisted that this guy was a celebrity, and so like we just took all these pictures, and we had a good night. But yeah, that's the kind of experience you can have in Kyoto. Just walking around and going off the beaten path is just walking around the geisha district, running away from the police, and walking into a bar, and you end up meeting some pretty fun people. And that's generally how our trip was.
Thankfully,
so we have a bunch
being
of
arrested.
Yeah. We didn't end up in the geisha jail, so that was good. Another city that I would recommend in Japan would be Kanazawa. And Kanazawa is more of an up-and-coming type of city. It just made National Geographic's top 10 places to go visit in the world. So, but that we found that out after we were on our way going over there. And I think upon landing is when they had just made the list. But the thing I'll flag about that place is it rains a lot. Like it's nonstop rain. When we were there, it was raining all the time. But what they're known for is their fish. So coming from a place of fish, which is Peru and Florida, I would say I have quite a palate when it comes to fish.
Sure.
And this place had some of the best fish I've ever tasted in my entire life. If you enjoy fish, definitely go to Kanazawa. They have one of the biggest, if not the biggest, fish market. I've been to the one also in Tokyo, and this one is better up and beyond anything. So those are a couple places I'd recommend. Osaka is also fun too. It's a lot like Kyoto though, but if I could recommend anything, it's go to Kyoto if you're going to Japan for the first time, and check out Kanazawa. It's got great food.
Did
So,
you experience sushi while you were there?
oh, of course, yeah. We definitely went pretty hard on the sushi. The best thing about Japan, I would say, is the food for sure. You won't eat poorly anywhere, and you can eat just on the go sort of everywhere. They're they have a bunch of 7-Elevens actually where you can just pick up these little like sushi roll like sandwiches, and they're delicious. You can have that for breakfast in the morning if you're sort of wanting to get up and out and just have a little bite to eat for like $2-3.
7-Elevens in Japan, that's an experience in and of itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. They're incredible. I wish we had them in the States. It once it becomes a way of life, it becomes very hard going into any gas station in the States. I wish we had something like that. In general, in Japan, that's the thing that isn't lost these days, is even though it's gotten obviously more technologically sort of advanced, people still are walking, going to work, going out to bars. It's not this, just insulated type of lifestyle, which thankfully in Chicago, we don't feel it that bad. But certainly when I'm in Florida, it's a whole different sort of world now. So that's one thing in general in Japan that hasn't been lost. People reading actual newspapers, manga in their hands. It's just it's different. Kids still like to play with toys. There's still arcades. Yeah, I can go on all day about how Japanese culture still has a lot of these things that I know for a fact have been lost in the U.S. So it's if I could live any place in the world, that would be a place I would consider.
Wow.
There or Portugal.
Any other stories jump out at you that are like, hey, I can't move on from Japan before I remember this night or remember this place that I saw, which was just, raw beauty, or, temples, or.
I mean, there really is just so much in Japan in general. I can go on really the entire podcast talking about everything in Japan. So many stories with different people, different tourists, different locals, all shades of life. I don't know. It's one of those things where I could really just sit here all day and talk about it. I wouldn't say there's any one in particular that I would say, oh yeah, you have to know this thing. I would say that, between the cities that I've been to, those were a few of the things that jumped out at me. And the rest of it is just really up to the audience whenever they go visit.
Sure. And that's, the whole, the thing of this podcast that sets it apart from others is I really do enjoy the tips. I think it's great for people who are listening if they plan to go somewhere to be able to hear these things, especially like when you're talking about going off the beaten path and these little places that you can find and these little gems, hidden gems. But for me, it is about the story. So even if it's not like this is a destination that you have to go to, but this is an experience that I had that I'll never forget. That's kind of the things that I'm looking, to share with everybody. But
oh yeah, for sure. So yeah, even on this trip recently, a lot of this stuff is just when you go out at night, just sort of finding different people and different things. So I remember we were looking. I can't remember if this was I think this was in Kanazawa, where we ended up going to this. We wanted to have just a small nightcap, and so this is the end of the night. Kanazawa is not a really big city, so not a lot of things are necessarily happening. But I look at my phone and I'm basically searching for some kind of a bar around, right? And I asked around, but nobody really knew any places. So I ended up finding one like 5 blocks down. And what this bar was it was definitely someone's apartment. And this guy lived like literally, it was like a little nook above the bar, but the place was an actual bar itself. So, but it was themed like a sea, right? Like there were like seashells around. There were, just like the mast of a boat, like little sailboats. Like it was like themed but the thing is everybody in Kanazawa who was drinking was there. So it was just like this very small, intimate space. And so we ended up getting to know all sorts of people in that room, just like what they did. We met a pair of girls who were actually from Tokyo. So they give us a bunch of recommendations in Tokyo, in Kyoto. It was just interesting to hearing all these different stories. And I wish I could talk about them at length and sort of how they ended up moving from one city to another. And just the Japanese history is different through different generations of lenses. I'll say that. So that's been one thing that I really enjoyed going to Japan, was just how open they were to sharing things, which I don't think is something that people talk enough of when it comes to Japanese culture. People tend to think, oh, they're, maybe quiet and don't want to say as much, or sort of or maybe not inclusive. But we had the complete opposite effect in Japan. Complete inclusivity.
And I think that's the truth. I think that's the way it is most everywhere. From what I understand is, yeah, they work hard. They unwind. They like to go to the bars and have a few beers after work, whatever. But then they go home to their families, but it's just because they have their groups of friends or their groups of people or coworkers that they hang out with doesn't mean that they're not open to having discussion. And I think it's the opposite. I think they are very open to having conversations and talking to visitors. So
yeah, for sure. But yeah, that would be what I would recommend when it comes to Japan in general, is just go out and meet some people. And even if you don't drink or whatever the case is, just talk. They are very open people.
Yeah. So, and I recommend that anywhere you go. Just talk to people. Just and don't, like you said, don't stick to just the places. And even if you're going from one place to another that are landmarks, if you can, walk there. Because you never know what you're going to encounter. Yes. Any experiences with that?
Oh, just like walking to a place and running into people?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be in Japan. We can stray.
Yeah. So I was going to talk a little bit about that. So I've been thankful enough in my life through my father, because I know, about my love of basketball. Well, my father has an even deeper obsession when it comes to soccer. So I was blessed basically from 2006 up until 2018 to go to every World Cup up until then. So it's a very unique experience. Every 4 years, all of these people coming together and in one place, and how that place receives them. And every place was unique that I've been to. So I went to, in 2006, to Germany. I went in 2010 to South Africa. In 2014, I went to Brazil. In 2018, I went to Russia. And it was just, you go in there sometimes with some stereotypes. How can you not? We'd all be lying if we didn't say that there were different things that we thought about prior to going in. And most of the time, those stereotypes are complete BS.
Well, I think the thing to remember is the Russian people don't necessarily reflect the Russian government. And that's the same, I think, with anywhere.
Not at all. Yeah, and normally on these World Cup trips, you are doing quite a bit of logistical traveling. So going from one city for one game to another city, another game. So you tend to meet people on the way doing that. And so my father and I are pretty good about meeting other people, and especially other Latinos. My dad's really good at meeting them. I meet a lot of Americans. And as we've gone traveling more and more to World Cups, we've actually been able to be in groups of people. So I'm in some group chats with World Cup travelers, and these people go to all sorts of different soccer tournaments, and we've kept up all throughout the years. So these are very unique experiences that people tend to congregate to. And then there's also, people that you meet from these countries that I'll say one story. When I went to South Africa in 2014, one thing that my father and I like to do is we like to buy, tickets. And, sometimes you can make some pretty good money on them, selling them in the secondary. So, we would do that like back in the day. And my dad wanted to go and sell these, basically for the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, there was a huge fear to go to South Africa. So it was actually one of the least attended World Cups, which is a shame because it was an amazing World Cup all up and down. I could talk about that a whole entire episode. But basically, my dad was stuck. We went to this place, I think it was called Pretoria, Pretoria in South Africa. And the way I can describe this place, I was probably at the time? I was maybe 19? Yeah, I was probably like 19 around then. And I just remember it being sort of almost like a desert, right? Like it's like just desert shacks. It reminded me a lot of Peru, sort of like up in the mountains. You tend to have people of, unfortunately lower socioeconomic standards, right? And what was nice about South Africa is they wanted you to see every city, not just, Johannesburg and the nice areas, Cape Town, but they wanted you to go to other cities. And so we were there for a Uruguay versus Mexico match. And we saw, for any of the soccer players out there, some of the hallmark matches that you probably saw during this time we were at. So another story for another day, but we ended up going to Pretoria and my dad stuck with these tickets. And he just at this point, like, you know what? We should just give these away. Like, basically, there were people offering like $5, $10 to sell me. He's like, you know what? Screw that. I'm not going to do that. He's like, I'm going to give it to somebody from this village, basically, and give it away for free because it was one ticket, and they can join us for the game. So we were, basically walking into the stadium, and we basically like hold up the ticket. I think it's me at the time. I hold up the ticket, and I'm like, who wants a ticket? And all these kids just start running up to us, and I felt so bad. I'm like, I don't know like who I want to say yes to, but there's this girl who was among them, and because she wasn't like running right up to me, but she sort of was curious and sort of standing by, and then she like smiled at me. I said, you can come with us, like, and she just went and just started walking with us to the game. And we took her there, and I know for a fact because she's written to me since then. And it's crazy because that was 2010, and she was probably around my same age, 19, 17 at the time, something like that. Mm-hmm. She's got a family, she's got kids now. I've seen her grow up. We exchange, each other's information on Facebook, and yeah, I mean, those are the kind of stories that you remember. And she says to this day, she's always going to remember going to a World Cup game. That if it wasn't for us, you would have never had that experience. And so that's the kind of stuff that you just can't replicate on a lot of trips, because not always will the country that you go to host this amazing tournament every 4 years. But it's through that augmentation of giving to others that you sometimes can also create wonderful ripples of a story as well.
Dude, that's so awesome. That's so awesome. Like, to literally have a life-changing experience that you were a part of. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And thankfully there's been a lot of those along the way. So we tend to have, quite a giving attitude.
One of the things I wanted to touch on briefly, because you mentioned, speaking of the soccer, before the World Cup, first World Cup you went to, it sounds like you went to in Brazil with the Peruvian soccer team. What does that mean?
So this was a very interesting trip, and how this whole thing sort of manifested. Basically, what ended up happening was my father, through a close contact of his brother, my uncle, basically he was able to, for this. So at the time, I'll sort of describe to anybody out there who knows soccer, this is like the 2004, 2005 time period. And so Peru is playing against Brazil in Brazil. And so this was for an actual World Cup elimination game. And at the time, this was Peru's like best team. I mean, these guys. So the thing about Peruvian soccer that's a little different than, you might know Messi, for instance, from Argentina. You may know the old Ronaldo from Brazil. You may know all these famous players from South America. But Peru, very few and far between if we had players that end up in the big leagues of Europe. But during this time in particular, we had sort of the golden era of players who were playing on the big teams in Europe. We had several of them. The team ended up underachieving quite a bit, another story for another day, but this was before South Africa, so that time period. And so basically what ends up happening, and actually, no, this is before Germany. So before this ends up happening in Germany, we end up going to this World Cup elimination match. And this team at the time, if anybody's listening that knows Brazil, this was Kaká on the team. This is Adriano. This is Cafu. This is Ronaldo, a little bit older, but still on the team. This was Brazil's like a golden era as well. So this was like their best of the best team, or maybe like second or third best of the best team, but still up there in terms of just how classic this team was. So granted, I knew when we were going to this game, we were probably going to watch Peru lose, but my favorite player was playing in Brazil, and his name is Kaká. So my dad, I don't know if he really thought about that so much. He just had a great opportunity for us to go traveling with him. So we went on the plane, and we were there with the Peruvian soccer team. And actually, when we leave, the AC goes out. So we're sweating just so hard in there. And it was just kind of horrific getting over there in the first place just because of that. But we actually got to bond quite a bit with the players. And the thing is that all these years later, even from 2004, there's one player who still to this day is playing on the Peruvian national team. He's 41 years old, and he's become a staple since then. But I saw him back then at 19, and I was 14 or 15. And so little by little, all these legends, they end up all becoming legends in some way in Peru. I get to see all their personalities on the plane. This guy that I'm talking about was more, I guess, I don't know, he was to himself. He wasn't really like this like vocal guy, right? He almost looked emo at the time. You know, he had like his like long hair, you know, over his eyes. And this was around the time of all that stuff. And I don't know, it was just interesting seeing all the dynamics of the players on the actual plane itself. And so I had the blessing to be up close and personal with them, to take pictures with all of them, and go traveling with them to Goiás. And Goiás in itself is a city that I don't think, if you were to take a panel on anybody who listens to this episode of who's been to Goiás, I don't know if you'll find anybody, because it's a very small city in Brazil, very unlike a lot of other cities in Brazil that I've been to. And yeah, this is where the game was. It was like a one-time sort of thing. And so what ends up happening is we get to the game eventually. There's all sorts of other things I can talk about, but we get to the game and I have this ball. My intention is to get Kaká to go and sign the ball. And so my dad and I go exploring around the stadium to try to find out where the bus is. And we keep asking people and they're like, go over here, go over there. And I can go into how crazy of a story that was. But sure enough, we end up outside the bus. And I have that ball in my hand, and the security guards are trying to go and like push us away. Like, no, you can't be here. You can't be here. And so then I take the ball and I see Cafu. And Cafu, by the way, is like an all-time great for Brazilian soccer. He's a defender. So I see Cafu and I'm like, I think he's a nice guy. And he plays on my favorite team, AC Milan. So I'm going to just throw this ball to him and see what happens. And so I threw the ball to him, and then he goes and he like picks up the ball and just looks at it with like a weird face. And then he's like, oh, awesome. He's like, and then he just goes and like he like asks for a pen from like one of the bag boys or something, and then he gets it and he signs it, and then he starts handing it off to the rest of the team.
Oh gosh!
And so I end up getting the entire Brazilian team to go and sign that ball, and including Kaká.
I hope that's where that story was going, with something like that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and not only did I get to go and witness, or not only did I get to have like this ball signed, but when my father and I were in the stadium. And we're sitting right just up close. My dad got wonderful seats to go and see the game. And Kaká's dribbling the ball up towards where we are, right? He shakes left, he shakes right. He takes on like 4 or 5 defenders, blasts it inside the goal. The game ended up being 1-0. And who scored but my favorite player, Kaká. And I got to see him right there in his prime. And just to give you context, Bill, since you may not be aware of who Kaká is, you do know who Cristiano Ronaldo and who Messi are, right?
Absolutely.
They would go being Ballon d'Or winners from 1 year to the next, 1 year to the next, 1 year to the next, right? Basically from like 2004 all the way to 2015, let's say. There was no third person really in that race. It was always one or the other, except in 2007 when Kaká won it. That's the one person in between all of this time that they were going back and forth who won it. At one point, he was the king of the world in soccer.
That's unbelievable.
And he got to that point. And just to sort of tie up this story, just because it's coming to my head now and I haven't talked about this in a long time, but my father and I have a really deep history with soccer. And that's a whole nother story for another day. And I don't keep saying that because it's a lot, it's heavy. But my father, he, due to working very hard, he didn't get to be around in my life as much. But when it came to soccer, that was a way for us to go and bond. So my love for the game really came through just wanting to be around my father and wanting to know enough about the sport to be able to talk with him because we didn't also talk a whole lot back then. And so one of our big debates when I was growing up was about these 2 players. One of their names was Rubinho and the other name was Kaká. And at this time, we're watching them both play. Kaká at the time was 17 years old. He hadn't even gone to Europe to go play yet for AC Milan. He was playing for Sao Paulo, and Robinho was about to go to Europe. And so he was the guy with all the hype. And my father thought that this other guy, Diego, he was the next one. He sort of played a little bit like Messi. Short, could dribble like really well. That's the style that my dad likes. But I got to witness at this time. This was in the United States. This was a tournament, Gold Cup at the time. And this was the B team for Brazil. They were so good at the time that they could bring, and maybe even their C squad. That's who they brought to go against the United States, right? All these kids. But this team ended up being a team of superstars, like guys who went and dominated the world, all these players. But I got to watch Kaká play at that time for the first time, and he was 17 years old. And when I saw him play, I told my dad, this is going to be the guy. He's going to be the leader of Brazil. And sure enough, and my dad was like, no, it's going to be Diego. I'm telling you, like, I've watched the sport for a long time. I know. And I'm like, no, Dad, I'm telling you, this is going to be the guy. And sure enough, I was right. And Kaká, like, yeah. So in a lot of ways, watching him play was and that whole experience of watching him from the beginning. And I watched his last game too. His last game was in Chicago. So when I tell you that some of these things sometimes almost seem like they're preordained, pre-planned, this is like a manifestation of that. And so Brazil, in a lot of ways, is tied into soccer. It offers so much more, but you can't talk about Brazil without talking about soccer. So
I hear you.
Thank you for letting me go on my little spiel with my relationship with soccer in Brazil.
I love it so much. I love it so much.
Mm-hmm.
We are definitely getting toward the end of the episode. I want to ask you a few more questions before I let you go. So
no problem.
One of the things, I know you talked about the food in Japan. You've talked about the food in Peru. Is there a place you can say, this has the best food on earth that I've ever had?
Well, I'm super biased with Peru, so I'm going to exclude that out. But yeah, I would definitely say Peru takes the all-time ranking for me. If I had to go with my favorite food in the entire world, besides Peru, let me think. That's a very good question. I think, yeah, it would have to be Japan for me. Japan would be it, just because the diversity of food over there. Yeah, I look for a couple things when it comes to food. It's basically, how do they source it, right? So in Japan, you can get their, Kobe quality meat only in Japan. Like, that's why they call it, Kobe, is because it's from a specific type of cow in Japan. So you can't if you get it in the US, you're paying, threefold for something that you can only have as fresh if you go over there.
There's something here called Denver Kobe. It's not, I'm sure it's not the same.
Yeah, it's not. So you have that, you basically have, just like the meats themselves, they have like their own like wonderful meats in Japan. The fish is out of this world, and because it's in a different, ocean entirely, it's just different than anything else I've had before. And what else? Sushi, the way, if you want to go like very gastronomy, high level sushi, they have Michelin star restaurants. You can go up and down if you want that type of food. If you like rices, you can get some beautiful, wonderful, rice bowls, the vegetables. I mean, you could really go just all day in Japan. And I haven't even been to northern Japan yet, like Hokkaido and some of these other places where they actually use quite a bit of the earth in order to be able to get the richness out of their food. So in Hokkaido, it's basically, think of it like Game of Thrones, like in the north, like all full of snow. I mean, it really is just like white everywhere. And so there's all sorts of unique things that you can do there, apparently, that I haven't been to, but I would like to go. So just the eco-diversity really brings a lot in Japan in ways that I haven't seen anywhere else. So I would say there.
And then a lot of the bigger cities with the street food too, I'm sure.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. And, I'm not gonna have to, like, I'm from Chicago, and I think the food over here is absolutely incredible. I think in terms of the country, I like the food over here in general more than I would like the food in Miami and in Florida in general. It's just, the food over here, if you exist in Chicago, especially these days, then you exist for a reason, because the people over here will not let you survive business-wise unless you are the best. So
had a pretty good slice of pie at Pasquad's. It was pretty good.
Exactly. Pequod's.
Or Pequod's.
Yep, Pequod's. I always take people there, and everybody loves it. My father went there twice when he was there recently with me. But I will give it up to New York, because even though they have issues in terms of places that are very popular, very reputationally renowned, at the same time, and they're not always hits. Sometimes they're just sort of like, oh, Instagram, or this person said it, so I think it's good. They do have just every kind of food that you can possibly find. So if you do want the best Japanese food, you'll find it over there. If you want the best sort of, Portuguese dish, you'll find a Portuguese restaurant. Just by the sheer amount that they can offer there, I would say New York is very underrated in terms of just, you can find these places. You can basically find any restaurant you want in the entire world.
Yeah. Awesome. And I agree with you, at least Chicago, New York City, both actually excellent food towns. I'd be remiss if I don't ask you, give me one story of anywhere that you've been that was just so super crazy, near death, maybe not, I'm not saying necessarily that's what I'm looking for, but crazy, something just out of this world. Can't believe that this happened. Near death is on the table, though, if you have something like that.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't think we've ever done anything that crazy before where my life was at stake, but I guess something that was a bit risky. I'm looking through my list right now to see if there's any. Okay, you know what? I'll give you one over here that I'm remembering right now. So basically, when I was in South Africa, yeah, in South Africa, basically, you drive on the other side of the wheel, and one of the things, unfortunately, or on the opposite side of the road. So one thing, unfortunately, when it came to the World Cup in South Africa, was it was very difficult to basically go from one city to the other in public transit. So you kind of miss that aura. I had been to Germany in 2006, and you had that ambiance of tons of people at the train station going from train to train. You didn't really have that in South Africa. You had to go by car. So I believe this was going from Pretoria to somewhere else, if I'm not mistaken. So in order for us to get to where we had to go, we had to leave in like the middle of the night. So we're leaving this, very desolate, small, just imagine it's like third world country type of city. And we're getting in this like kind of beat up rental, right? And it's me, my dad, and my sister. My sister's sitting in the back. I'm the person in the front doing GPS. My father is sitting next to me, right? And so I'm supposed to be telling him, turn left, turn right, all this other stuff. And as we're driving, my sister goes and looks up and sees these signs, and it says hijacking zone. And then she's like, hijacking zone. What does that mean? Because she was so young at the time, she really didn't know what it meant. And then my dad was like, hijacking zone. Wait, and he just starts flipping out on the thing. And so then, at the time, we don't have smartphones. We're using like a Garmin, right? Like this little Garmin thing. And so I think we even took the Garmin from our house in the United States and brought it with us over there just so we could have it. And so I'm looking at this Garmin and I'm just like, Dad, I think it says turn right because these are all like dirt roads and stuff. And then my dad is like, what do you mean? What do you mean turn right? There is no right over here. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I meant go straight and then turn right. He's like, Renato, this is the hijacking zone. Oh my God. Like, and then he's like, I can't stop. And then like, you're just freaking out the whole time. And I don't know, like the nighttime sometimes plays like tricks on you. So you're looking around and you're thinking that you're just going to like see these people that are going to run up and go and like take you or do something. And yeah, that didn't quite happen.
Like, is it a warning that this could happen here, or is this the designated hijacking zone? like this is where you can hijack only. Yeah,
this is like where people tend to get hijacked. Like, there's like a picture of like a car and like someone with like a mask, like going and like I don't know, like taking like it's very descriptive. If I could have taken a picture at the time, I should have. But like, yeah, hijacking zone, South Africa. And then one of the funniest things, or no, I'm sorry, this was not funny. This was actually very scary. We heard about one sort of thing that these that these hijackers would do, which is that basically they would try to run into your car so that you would end up stopping, and then they would take another car and go in front of you. And so we actually had that situation almost happen to us where someone basically was trying to ride up on my dad and hit him from behind, and then this other car got right in front of us. And I was like, Dad, I'm pretty sure these guys are trying to go and hijack us right now. And then actually my dad freaked out less during this time than he did seeing the hijacking zone sign.
He turned into like protection mode.
Yeah, I guess so. But he ends up just like, we had like an exit near us and he just ends up going off to the exit. The guys end up I don't know, turning, doing some other stuff. We end up losing them. But that was a story.
Jeez.
But yeah, that was, people had some fears going into South Africa. Otherwise, I would say they're some of the nicest people in the entire world. And again, when we do another episode, I can talk up and down about how just these are some of the kindest people I've ever met in my life.
That's you got scary and crazy and near death all in one. That was good. That was great, dude.
That was just one off the top of my head. I'm sure there's several other ones that I'm just not remembering right now. But yeah, that was one for sure.
Wow. Well, let's wrap with a couple. I got just a couple more questions for you. So I want to know if there's any place that you have already been that, for whatever reason, not that you didn't necessarily like it or whatever, but if I don't go back there again, I'm good.
Oh, I got one just even on my most recent trip. I'm going to try to choose my words carefully, but yeah, not the biggest fan of Hong Kong. It's my second time going. I wouldn't have gone if it wasn't for my friend's wedding, basically. And the it's not that I don't like the city. I think the food is pretty like good, but it's basically just a way more expensive version of any other big city you go to. It's almost like another New York City, but yeah, it's just like really expensive. I don't know. For me, it wouldn't be a place that I would go out of my way to. Like, I don't know why somebody would want to go to Hong Kong all the time when it's basically the same as any big city that you have in the US, but not as clean and not, as, I don't know, to each their own, right?
Sure.
Beautiful skyline, nice people. But yeah, I told my wife last time, I don't see myself ever going back to Hong Kong. Never say never, right? But
Sure.
yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
there isn't really too much to do either, right? There's no like crazy historical landmarks or anything like that. It's tall buildings. Just yeah, I don't know what I would do if I were there for longer than 2-3 days, which is all I've been before each time I've been there. So
Okay.
even that to me was like it felt like a long time.
Very
And also too, there's a little bit of these are just some of the places that I experienced, but a little bit of rudeness sometimes. So we actually had a confrontation with an Uber driver who basically, was, I mean, he looked like he was going to get into a fight with us. It got so bad. And this was just because our bags, I guess, didn't fit inside of his car, but he put himself as an XL and it wasn't an XL. And I don't know. It was an unfortunate experience. But having gone from Japan to Hong Kong, that's where I just saw the dichotomy of differences in terms of service, in terms of just candor. It was like a whole different experience, just that juxtaposition between one country and the other. So yeah,
Very interesting.
But I do love China. I've been to Shanghai, I've been to Beijing. Hong Kong's just a different beast, and that's why there's mainland and that's why there's Hong Kong. But I guess that might be a little surprising for people. They might think maybe mainland is a little bit more, I don't know, like you said, the government doesn't reflect the people, but I find I had better experiences in mainland China than I did in more American-centered Hong Kong.
Thank you for that. That's cool to hear that, especially, yeah, like you said, going from Japan, very hospitable, very friendly people, and a lot to see and do, I guess. Yeah, I hadn't given Hong Kong much of a thought as a place, a destination for myself, but it was never, it's not off the list. It's interesting to hear that. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, it's just, if you, go to New York and you'll have the same, you'll have even a better experience going to New York than you would going to Hong Kong, just because there's
money.
way more things to do. Yeah. And, one thing too is also, and this is the thing, and I'm saying this just because I think there needs to be a reevaluation of what, I guess their hospitality decides to go and do with things. But in Japan, when you are staying, let's say, at a hotel, right? First of all, the hotels, they used to be very small in size. They've gotten considerably bigger and more bang for your buck because Airbnbs got really competitive. And so at these hotels, though, and when we were there in 2016, we went to pure Airbnbs. Now we did all hotels because the price difference dropped that much. But these hotels, not only are the people super friendly at the Japanese hotels, but they give you every kind of like thing imaginable for free, like free shampoo, free shaving, free like masks, like they go above and beyond even American hotels in terms of what they give you for free. In Hong Kong, I kid you not, so my razor, I think it like broke when I was on the trip or something like that. So I needed a razor, and we were staying at a hotel where there was a mall. And I end up going down there and asking, so previously in Japan, I was just getting free razors all the time, right? I think when I'm down in Hong Kong, like, hey, by the way, where can I get the razors? And they're like, oh, get them at the mall. And that was it. Like, cold, go get them at the mall. And my wife and I were just like, really? And then I come to find out that there is actually a rule in Hong Kong that they can't give any kind of hygienic products, to which I'm like, wait a second, you don't want people to be cleaner?
Wow.
You don't want to promote public health? What the heck? Why would you do that? So I don't know. It's just those kind of things you really should reevaluate as a country when you want to become a destination for people. But again, I don't think people really go to Hong Kong because they necessarily, like, that's a place that they necessarily, like, I want to go to Hong Kong. It's probably because of business or a connection of some other sort. So
very interesting.
Just wanted to go and mention that part out, reevaluate that, Hong Kong.
Yeah. And so on the flip side, where is a place that you have not been that, like, the place that, cost notwithstanding, time notwithstanding, you have to go?
Yeah, so it would definitely have to be, for me, it would definitely have to be Oceanica. Somewhere, if it's Australia, New Zealand, some of those islands. I don't think I've done enough sort of island type of stuff. I'm pretty light on it. I have done, Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, but I don't know. Puerto Rico is basically another American state, and Costa Rica was, yeah, it was very Americanized as well. So I just really think having, I don't know, going to Australia and seeing Sydney and all that would be really cool, just as a off the bucket list type of thing. And I hear really nice things about Australia in general, but I would like to also travel beyond, Sydney, Melbourne, and go explore some of the other more naturistic type of places in the water, because I hear that that's absolutely beautiful on that side of the world. So, yeah, Australia, New Zealand. And I've met a lot of people from there, a lot of travelers. And so I tend to just really enjoy the people as well. So, yeah, that would be a place that would be next on my list if I can go anywhere.
Yeah. Those are on my list as well. Where have you been that you absolutely have to go back to again? And maybe it's Japan. You've been there a couple times, but maybe it's that. But where you have to go back?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Japan's, I think, always going to be top of my list. With if I could go there several times a year, I would, because what I would do is, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is I would go to northern Japan. So they got also the islands of Japan. So you have that sort of island ambiance that I have yet to go and see. So that part of Japan. There's a video game that I really liked a long time ago for Shenmue. It's a game called Shenmue, and it takes place in the 80s in Japan. And there's this village that was basically run by the United States. So you had like this military base. There's a place called Yokosuka. And this video game, what was interesting about it is, at the time, it was the most expensive game ever made. And basically what they did is they redeveloped street to street exactly the way that Yokosuka looked back in the 80s. So, wow. I mean, almost like picturesque, perfect. And these people, like, they had like, it was the first game that had real NPCs, so non-playable characters. Jeez. That they sort of had their habits throughout the day. I'll give an example. Like, there was like a little kid that every single morning he would walk up to like this little toy machine, and if you were to go up to him and talk to him, he'd say, "Hey, can you go buy me a toy?" And then your character would say, "No, I can't." And he would say, "You dweeb." And then like that little kid might go walk off to like the playground and play there at like 2:00. So there were all these like little stories and these little things, and that was my first real sort of experience after having gone to Japan at 8, that I could sort of almost go back. And so visiting that city would be cool, the islands, and then also up north where like you have like the icy towns, the springs, that kind of thing. I could go on all day for the things I want to do in Japan. It's just never enough time. So yeah, it would be Japan all over again for me. And second would be Portugal.
Nice. And is that something, I'm going to ask this. I just want to know, for you, when you go somewhere, when you plan a trip, do you consciously think like, there's so much of the world is so vast, it's hard for me to choose to go back to a place that I've already been to because there's so much to explore? Or are you not necessarily like that because you figure over time we'll be able to get to the places I want to go to, and I really loved this place, so I want to go back there? Or do you want to actually kind of avoid going back because you want to see more of the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically, it's, I think, the former, what you said just now, because I noticed with a lot of people, especially nowadays with this very Instagram-driven crowd, where basically people are just trying to check something off of their list, right? And I almost mentioned it a second ago with Sydney. Like, I'd like to check that off on my list, right? And I tried, like, even though I said it before, I really try, even if I am going to do that, to do something else in the country that'll make that experience more unique. And so typically what I do, and it wasn't something that I consciously thought about, it was something kind of organic that happened with my wife and myself. But I certainly, when we go on trips, we really try to not go from city to city to city to city to city, just to go and, have a night in this city and a night in that city so that we can say, oh, we've been to 10 cities in this place. No, we pick 1 to 3, and we try to enjoy that as much as we can. And really, the first time that we did that was in Shanghai, where we were actually supposed to go to Iceland because there was this airline at the time, Wow Air, I think they were called,
Yeah.
that basically were offering these tickets to go to Iceland direct from Chicago to Iceland for like $400, $500, unheard of, right? And my wife's dream is to go see the Northern Lights. So if you asked her the previous question, that's probably what she would say, is some anywhere she can watch the Northern Lights. And that airline ended up going under. My wife was sharp enough at the time when they were going under to get a refund for our tickets. So we got the refund and we ended up going to Shanghai, where I had some friends that I studied with that lived over there. And so we spent, I think it was all like our whole spring break at the time in Shanghai, just in one city. Whereas maybe if you talk to other people about what they would have done differently, like they would have wanted to go to this place in China and that place in China, whatever it is. My wife and I just had fun just for a week, waking up and just living a life in Shanghai and just hanging out there, going to just, and we just spent all of our time in that one city. And from that point on, that's really what our trips became, is just go to a country and experience as much as we can there. I don't mind that I don't see every inch of the world because it's frankly impossible to go do.
Sure.
If I like a place, I want to reconnect with it. And so I am all about going back to places that I've been to before, but always doing something new. I was leaving something to go back for. I think that's actually a theme of last year's trips, is you can't do everything on a trip. Always have something to come back to.
Yeah,
it's very important.
Yeah, I love it. And so what's on your list? Where are you going? What do you have plans for in the near future? Anything?
Oh, right now, nothing big right this second. We are, I think, so we live in Chicago, and we haven't in some time. We've gone to some part of the Midwest, like we've done Iowa, we've done Minneapolis, but we really haven't gone to see, every part of the neck of the woods of the Midwest. So I think we want to do a lot more road trips this summer, take advantage of the summer break, or not the summer break, the summer weather. But so there's that. I would say we're probably gearing towards doing in the summer. Do another trip to Florida to go see friends and family. Do that all the time, and then I would say probably around November, because my wife and I, basically what we do every year, and it's a nice little life hack for anybody who's listening, that going abroad during Thanksgiving week. I've never been a big Thanksgiving guy. It just never was like any kind of appeal to me. Another story for another day. But basically, my wife was sort of in the same boat. She doesn't really like turkey that much, which is, I'm sure, a sin for a lot of people hearing this. But both of us together in our mutual dislike for Thanksgiving were basically like, we can go anywhere we want to during this time of the year, and it'll be cheaper than going within the United States at this particular time. And we tend to have work off. It's a national holiday. So every year prior to the pandemic, we would always take Thanksgiving week off. And in fact, this trip to Japan was during Thanksgiving. So yeah, we'll probably go, I would say this year, since we just went to Colombia, we'll probably go to Peru this year, go visit my grandmother, who's God bless her, 92 years old. And she's from the indigenous she's indigenous herself, speaks Quechua, the indigenous language in Peru. And she's from a place called Ica in the mountains. So I've always wanted to go visit Ica. And so I think we're going to probably plan a trip to go do that. And that'll be what we do.
Sounds great.
I'm pretty sure. And then in December, I think we're going to plan on going somewhere for New Year's. It's been a long time since we've done that. So I don't know yet where we'll go, but we were thinking Spain, because then we could hop over to Portugal again. And it's been a long time since I've been to Spain, and I have family there. So we're thinking that.
So great, man. And to think that we didn't touch on probably half of the places that you've been, and we haven't touched on probably 98% of the stories that you have. This was really wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. And I promise, as long as you're willing, you will be back on again, and probably a regular guest, because you don't stop traveling. So you're always going to have new stories. And so I would love to have you back on maybe sometime later toward the end of summer or something, and just see, first of all, we can touch on places that you've been that we didn't get a chance to talk about, and maybe see if you've happened to have gone anywhere in the meantime. So any last things you want to add before we wrap?
No, I just want to say thank you for doing this. I think this was a very unique experience having been on this podcast. I've done several, as you know. I run sort of my own show as well. And you've done a tremendous job and you're a great listener. And I just want to say that for anyone who's out there listening right now, if you do have an interesting travel story, I mean, this was really a wonderful experience from my perspective to be able to dig deep, not just in my own trips and stories, but also in just the psychology of why we travel. And your questions were very good. So keep it up and, keep pushing that side of travel. I think there aren't enough platforms out there like what you're building. And it's not, tip oriented. It's not, what are like the top 10 places to go visit? And that's very refreshing that you don't have that. It's about the stories. And I think that this is just a wonderful experience for both whoever's in the audience to listen to these stories or for the storyteller themselves. And you're a great conduit for it. So thank you for the opportunity. It
means a lot to me, man. I really appreciate that. So thank
No
you.
problem.
Thank you very much. Do you want to advertise where people can find you in any way if they just wanted to connect with you, but maybe they heard some stories that they really appreciated and they wanted to hear more or anything like that?
Yeah, so I run a community called Boards to Buckets. So if you look us up on YouTube, you can look up at Boards to Buckets. If you look up on Twitter, same deal. On Watch Playback, where we watch sports, it's playback.tv/B2B. B as in boy, the number 2, and then B as in boy. And if you look that up, it would be wonderful because we do have a very inclusive, I would say at least 40% of our audience is global on B2B. So, and if not global, then someone who's, I don't know, just maybe in America, but is from somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So we really pride ourselves on these global connections and humanistic perspectives. So I'm constantly on there talking, sharing things. So if you enjoy this sort of thing, then I talk 2.5, 3 hours to 5 hours at least once a week.
Yeah.
So you can check me out on Watch Playback mostly for that kind of stuff. Thank you very much for this opportunity again.
Thank you, man. This was great. And again, we'll do it again soon. So thanks again to Renato, and let's wrap there. And that's a wrap for episode 4. Thank all of you so much for the positive feedback. I can't believe the outpouring of positive love and support for this podcast. I thank you all so much. Renato was a great guest. We've got some other great guests coming up, of course. If you just love sitting back and relaxing and listening to these stories like I do, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends and support the pod. I really love all of you for doing that. And join us again next week as we have another great guest on the Where Have You Been podcast. My name is Bill Ream. Have a great day.